Ma'am, I'm going to have to confiscate that. This is a secure area, not a camping trip. What do you think you need a blade like that for anyway? The sergeant's voice dripped with condescending authority, loud enough for the entire queue at the main gate to hear. A few of the other military police, young men, barely out of training, smirked in unison. The line of contractors and off-duty personnel behind the woman shuffled their feet on the blistering asphalt, their gazes a mixture of pity and annoyance. But the woman herself offered no reaction. She stood in simple jeans and a plain grey t-shirt, a ghost of a figure against the backdrop of HESCO barriers and concertina wire. Her face was placid, her eyes calm, fixed on a point somewhere beyond the sergeant's shoulder. She simply held the knife out, handle first, an offering without argument. A younger corporal, however, saw something else. He saw her hands. The way her fingers rested on the warm martyr grip wasn't a casual hold. It was a state of being, as if the steel were an extension of her own bones. He'd seen that grip before, in old training films of men whose faces were blurred by sensors. If you believe competence is measured by character, not by appearance, type respect in the comments. The senior MP, Sergeant Miller, took her silence as defiance. He puffed out his chest, the fabric of his uniform straining. Look, lady, I don't know who you are, but you're not special. Rules are rules for everyone. Maybe that little toy makes you feel tough back home, but here it's a liability. We have professionals to handle security. He gestured vaguely at his own men who pined under the attention. Miller's gaze ran over her unassuming figure again, his mind filling in the blanks with lazy assumptions. Lost spouse, clueless logistician, another civilian who thought the war zone was a movie set. His prejudice was a shield protecting him from the uncomfortable possibility that the world was more complex than his narrow experience allowed. The woman, Morgan, remained a statue of calm. Her stillness seemed to amplify the oppressive heat rising from the ground. The distant hum of generators, the very tension of a place built on the precipice of violence. Her silence was not empty. It was dense, heavy with a discipline Miller couldn't begin to comprehend. He mistook her patience for weakness, her economy of motion for hesitation. It was a profound and soon to be a professionally fatal miscalculation. Suddenly, the air split apart. A high, piercing siren shrieked across the forward operating base. The unmistakable alarm for a perimeter breach. Infiltrator on the wire. Infiltrator on the wire. A voice screamed over the base. Wide address system. Chaos erupted. Civilians scrambled for cover, their faces pale with panic. Miller's men, for all their practiced swagger, were caught flat-footed for a critical second. Miller himself began barking orders, his voice a half-octave to high, betraying the adrenaline shock. He fumbled with the magazine on his rifle, his hands suddenly clumsy. Amidst the frantic motion, Morgan had not moved. Her body remained a fixed point of tranquility in a swirling sea of panic. But her eyes were alive. They weren't darting nervously. They were sweeping the distant fence line with a cold, analytical precision. They tracked, assessed, and discarded information in microseconds. Then her voice cut through the din of the siren. Not loud, but impossibly clear like a scalpel. Northeast corner to a clock from the water tower. Single individual moving low. Her words were pure data, stripped of all emotion. A report delivered from a place beyond fear. Sergeant Miller squinted in the direction she had indicated. The midday, sun glaring in his eyes. "I don't see a damn thing," he yelled back, irritated by the distraction from the woman he had just dismissed. He turned a shout at one of his men to get on the radio. He never finished the sentence. In a single fluid motion that seemed to defy the very laws of physics, Morgan flipped the knife in her hand, catching it by the tip of its blade. Her arm drew back and then snapped forward. There was no wind-up, no theatrical grunt of effort, just a release of potential energy, so efficient it was almost silent. The blade didn't tumble or wobble. It flew perfectly flat, a silver sliver of purpose against the hazy brown sky, covering the 200 yards to the perimeter fence in the blink of an eye. There was a faint flack, instantly followed by the sharp clang of steel hitting steel, and then the siren died. The abrupt, deafening silence that crashed down upon the gate was more shocking than the alarm itself. Every head turned towards the far corner of the base. A crackle came over Miller's radio. "Sergeant, the alarm's junction box. There's a knife stuck right through the main power cable. It had pinned the severed wire to the terminal post. We have the intruder." Miller stared, his mouth agape. He looked from the impossibly distant fence back to the woman. "That's not possible," he whispered. Just then, a black armored SUV skidded to a stop beside the gate, kicking up a plume of dust. The rear door flew open, and a full-bird colonel emerged, his face a mask of controlled fury. He was the base commander, and he strode past the stammering sentries as if they were statues, his eyes already locked on the woman in civilian clothes. He had seen the entire event from his command center window on a high-definition monitor. He ignored the terrified, confused face of Sergeant Miller. The colonel walked directly to Morgan, and as he drew closer, the anger on his face melted away, replaced by something else entirely, dawning recognition, followed by an expression of immense, unambiguous respect. He stopped a foot in front of her. "I believe this is yours, ma'am," he said, his voice a low rumble of authority as he gestured toward the distant fence line. "My apologies for my men. They lack perspective." He then turned his head slightly, his gaze falling on Miller like a physical weight. "Sergeant, pull up the file for a civilian contractor named Morgan. Evia Morgan, do it now." The younger, Corporal Diaz, the one who had noticed her hands, frantically tapped at the keys of a ruggedized laptop. His face was pale. The personnel file loaded onto the screen. Diaz's eyes widened. He read the first line, then the second, and his breath caught in his chest. Without a word, he turned the screen towards Sergeant Miller and the colonel. The text glowed in the harsh sunlight, a testament written in the cold, hard language of military bureaucracy, but telling a story of mythic proportions. The narrator's voice could have read the lines aloud. Name, Morgan. Rank classified. Unit. 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. Combat deployments. Operation Phantom Claw. Operation Serpent Strike. Redacted. Redacted. Special skills. Master Instructor. hostage rescue, specialist, advanced infiltration, and unconventional warfare. Awards: Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star with Valor Device, Bronze Star, Purple Heart. The list scrolled on. Miller's face went from disbelief to chalky white. The colonel turned back to face Morgan. He drew himself up to his full height and executed the sharpest, most profound salute of his career. A gesture of respect from a commander to a legend. "Ma'am," he said, his voice ringing with sincerity, "we weren't expecting your arrival until 0600. Welcome to the FOB. My gate team. We'll secure your gear." The story of the throw spread like a contagion of awe. Before the sun had set, every soldier, contractor, and airmen on the base knew. They told in the chow hall, whispering over trays of food. They told in the smoky confines of the designated recreation tents. They told it over encrypted radio channels between watchtowers. The incident at the main gate was no longer just an event. It was a legend. The location was given a new unofficial name. Morgan's line, the impossible 200-yard throw, became known simply as the cut. Sergeant Miller was quietly reassigned to supply, tasked with counting inventory in a windowless warehouse. His loud arrogance was gone, replaced by a permanent haunted humility. He learned the hard way that authority and competence are not the same thing. Corporal Diaz, however, was transformed. He saw in Morgan not an anomaly, but an ideal. He requested a transfer to a reconnaissance scout unit driven by a newfound understanding that the most dangerous enemy is your own set of assumptions. Morgan, for her part, simply retrieved her knife, wiped it clean, and began her real work, training the base's security forces. She never spoke of the incident. She didn't have to. Her quiet competence was now the loudest thing on the entire base. A few days later, just before he shipped out for his new assignment, Corporal Diaz went to the motor pool. He found the damaged junction box with a section of thick armored cable that Morgan's knife had so perfectly severed. He mounted the cable, with its to clean holes, onto a weathered piece of wood scavenged from a discarded ammo crate. Using a wood-burning tool, he carefully etched a single sentence beneath it. "Assumptions are heavier than gear. Carry them wisely." He hung the crude plaque on the interior wall of the MP guard shack at the main gate. It became a shrine of sorts, a focal point of institutional memory. Every new MP, every replacement guard was taken to the plaque and told the story, the tale of the quiet woman in jeans who threw a knife with impossible precision. Was now part of their training curriculum. The lesson was ingrained. Look deeper, judge slower. Respect is the default setting because you never ever know who you're talking to. True security wasn't about shouting commands. It was about the quiet wisdom to recognize lethality and professionalism, no matter how humbly it was dressed. Years passed. The forward operating bays became a permanent installation, a fixture of stability in a region that had known only chaos. The colonel was now a general, gray at the temples just weeks from retirement. He was leading a small delegation of young officers on a final tour of the base he had commanded for so long. They paused at the main gate, which was now a formidable automated complex of steel and concrete. But there on the wall of a new guard station hung the old weathered plaque. The general stopped and pointed to it. He didn't speak of Morgan's classified history or the medals she had earned at Shadow Wars. He just told the story of that one day. He spoke of a cocky sergeant and a quiet professional. He spoke about the physics of a perfect throw. But more importantly, he spoke about the anatomy of a flawed assumption. That one event, he explained, fundamentally changed their security posture, shifting focus from superficial checks to behavioral analysis. A true legacy isn't an object left behind, but a lesson that moves forward, passed from one generation to the next until it becomes instinct. The general finished his story, his voice filled with a reverence that time had not diminished. A young captain, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, stared at the plaque. She saw not just a piece of cable and a burned piece of wood, but a profound truth about the nature of her chosen profession. You could see the lesson taking root, the philosophy of the quiet professional being passed on once more. They say Sergeant Miller learned more about real power in that one moment of deafening silence than in a decade of shouting orders. And they say that Evelyn Morgan, without ever raising her voice, taught an entire generation of warriors that true strength never needs to advertise. It is simply there when it is needed most, proven not by the noise you make, but by the precision of your actions. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud arrogance, and where a person's true